It's good to see you once again. This is The Big Story. I'm Yvonne Okwara Matole. Tonight, it's all in the hands of Parliament to now vet and approve the nominee to the office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. This after President Uhuru Kenyatta forwarded the name of Noordin Haji from a list of 3 that had been shortlisted by the selection panel.
Today conveyed to the National Assembly for approval the following names: Noordin Mohammed Haji as my nominee for the position of Director of Public Prosecution.
All right, so what is the entree for the new office holder should he be approved by Parliament? What strides have been made in the office since it was delinked from that of the Office of the Attorney General following the promulgation of the 2010 Supreme Law? Tonight we will be discussing the successes and the challenges that the new director will have to inherit from this office. We invite you to send us your feedback, your interactions with the Office of the DPP, its successes, its challenges, and the nominee that will now be going before Parliament. Please use the hashtag #TheBigStoryTonight. Before we get into our conversation with my guests, I want us to just take a look at the evolution of this office since it was delinked from that of the Office of the Attorney General after the promulgation of the Constitution, that is in 2010. So take a look at this. These are some of the changes that have been made. Prosecution Council have increased from a mere 93 to the present 627, and this even falls far short of the recommended staff establishment of 926. Similarly, non-legal staff has grown from 112 to 402. Now, the ODPP at the time had only 13 field stations across the country. That was in 2011. But currently, there have been established fully fledged offices in all the 47 counties that are headed by a chief county prosecutor. Now, also to note is that there are about 121 court stations in all the country, the whole country, in which have been deployed prosecution counsel. Important to note, and you will remember this, that police prosecutors have been completely phased out. There were about 305 of them, and they were totally phased out in this move to have qualified prosecutors at the helm. Now, let's take a look at their performance in terms of national overall conviction rates for just a moment. So if you take a look at wildlife crime, for example, the conviction rates have gone up from 24% to 86%. Homicides have gone up to 73%. And if you remember, that State of the Judiciary and Administration of Justice report that was launched by the Chief Justice last year commended the ODPP for attaining the highest ever conviction rate of 72.4% in corruption and economic crimes cases. That was for the financial year 2016-2017. So those are just some of the highlights of where we are right now with the office of the DPP. However, there are still some challenges, and we'll be getting through that, especially with some of the high-profile acquittals in the cases that the ODPP has lost in court cases. We'll get to that in a moment, but let me introduce you to my guests tonight on the show. We've got Mudomi Diankolu, who is an advocate of the High Court, and he will speak of his interactions within the corridors of justice with the office of the DPP. And we also have Kakai Kissinger, also an advocate, but important to note that he's a former Deputy Chief Registrar of the Judiciary. And so tonight we'll be providing us with an insider's perspective of sorts. Also joining us on the program tonight is Advocate Lempa Suyanka. And he will be speaking as well about the challenges, the successes, and indeed the nominee that will now be before Parliament for vetting. But first, our lead reporter, Sophia Wanuna, is back on the show tonight. Sophia, it's great to have you back. Good to see you. So let's talk about, the nominee. First, there were 10, and now there is 1. Talk to us about the process that led us to this point.
Good evening, Yvonne. It's great to be back on the show tonight. So this process triggered by the appointment of the former DPP, that's Keriako Tobiko, to the Ministry of Environment. And so process then began to be able to find his replacement, and the Constitution is clear in as far as the institutions that will nominate an individual to sit in the panel that then vets and interviews interested candidates. So the panel of 7 was led by Dr. Elizabeth Muli, who was a representative from the Law Society of Kenya, amongst 6 others. And the vetting happened last week. So 10 candidates, as you mentioned there, submitted their names, were interested. 5 of those from the ODPP, the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions. 2 of them, in fact, being deputies of the DPP. And of course, that vetting took place, questions fielded to the participants and to the candidates, I beg your pardon, who had expressed their interest. 3 were shortlisted. Of those 3 was Nuruddin Haji, Senior Counsel Lucy Kambuni, as well as Jacob Ondari, who is a Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. And it's from that list, a short list that was submitted to President Uhuru Kenyatta, that he then nominated Nuruddin Haji. Nuruddin Haji is a Deputy Director at the National Intelligence Service. His career has largely been in that service. He was once at the State Law Office, albeit briefly, and also lectured at the University of Nairobi. So his name now submitted before Parliament. They will be discussing and deliberating this nomination. But those who know the goings-on and the kind of chatter behind this is that this is a done deal and that Mr. Haji will be the next DPP.
Right, and speaking of Nuruddin Haji, interesting choice from the country's spy agency now to the corridors of justice. Talk to us about this individual and maybe some of the questions that are being raised surrounding his suitability.
Yes, Yvonne, a number of lawyers have been able to speak to today, raising questions around his suitability in as far as engagement in the courtroom. That whilst, of course, to be able to qualify for this position, you must have practiced and, in fact, qualified to be a judge of the High Court. Concerns are rife that he's largely been in the NIS, and this is seen to be a pro-government collecting information agency, so that you're coming to our independent body with a mind that some are concerned that is really coming from an agency that's in, quote-unquote, the executive. So will he be able to execute these functions? Does he have enough experience? Concerns about has he been in courtrooms? Has he practiced even as a lawyer to be able to understand the vagaries, the challenges that come with the same, Yvonne? Others, of course, are raising concerns as well around Mr. Haji, saying that he's little known, and despite the experience that he may have gathered in terms of managerial, because those who speak for him and support his candidature say he's a manager, he has qualifications. But others speak to a person who will, if he gets endorsed and gets that green light, becomes the DPP. As I mentioned, 5 of those that lost in this process work in the ODPP. 2 of them are deputy DPPs. So how does he earn the confidence of these people who look at him as an outsider, look at him as a person who does not understand the real issues in this office? So again, that is something he'll have to be able to navigate if in fact he gets cleared. But the biggest concern, Yvonne, is being able to see whether this is a person who will be able to continue to lift up the flag in as far as the independence of his office, to continue with the work that so importantly needs to happen, especially in what many opine as getting the big fish, because yes, you'll hear of prosecutions in other areas, but when it comes to the senior officials, prominent individuals in government, in business, we never see those. And remember, this was in essence one of the driving reasons that saw that office carved out of the Attorney General, who sits in the executive, so that they could have independence to be able to go after even individuals in the executive. So is this a person that will not fear or fret to be able to get into those murky waters. We'll wait to see. But I want to engage the leader of majority in the Senate, who's joining me now. We're actually in his office. And I know you've been busy. Thank you so much for making time for us. You're a lawyer. You have been a chair of the Law Society of Kenya, and you're in the executive. Let's begin with a concern that's arising that by the time Keriako Tobiko resigned, there was a vacuum that was created between that time and now there's a nominee, and that any criminal matters, some that may come up during this period, could be thrown out because there is no substantive DPP.
First of all, I find that jurisprudence that was established when the EACC had a vacancy, I find it very faulty, because failure to have a substantive office holder is not a basis, cannot really be a basis of discarding a lot of evidence that has been collected by the people who are working in those offices, because we must look at it as an institution. We must not look at it as only the head of that institution. It's like saying that, if the head of a family is not there, whatever the family does, whatever they buy, whatever they invest in is invalid. I think although the courts have made a decision, it's something that I don't agree with. Yeah. And therefore, any investigation that took place, because one of the things that must be celebrated with the tenure of the former DPP was devolution of the office of DPP. And so you cannot tell me that an investigation that took place in Mandera or in Elgeyo Marakwet or in Kisumu, in the absence of the head of that institution, cannot go on, and prosecution cannot go on because that person is not there.
But leader, that notwithstanding, the Constitution as well does not envisage a situation where that office is vacant. So that ruling and what the court said notwithstanding, there is that provision as well. So did the government or president mishandle this process, is not putting into consideration all of these factors?
I don't think, not necessarily. What happens if someone dies? Let me take that as an example. Or what happens if someone is impeached? Yeah, there will be a vacancy.
But there's a process to fill that when the DPP is removed from office, but there is no clarity on when they resign.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If they resign, for example, they are tired and they want to resign, the same process that we are witnessing now will take place. Or suppose somebody dies in office, the same process will take place. So really, you cannot, that's why I disagree with those who say that vacancy invalidates the work that has been done by everybody else on an account of just one person not being in the office. Yeah. And I think it's important to also say that there was a reason why the process for appointing the DPP is what it is. The panel is appointed, people are nominated, they are brought to Parliament, and there's a Parliament that's going to vet the nominees, and they have a responsibility, and that Parliament has both minority and majority side. Mm. And I believe that the issues that people are raising, saying that, this person has not practiced, this person is not able to run the office. Let me give you an example. You're saying someone came from outside, bypassed the others. The Inspector General of Police, Mr. Boynet, was considered to be a very junior officer when he was appointed. But see the work he has done. In less than 2 years, we have a lot of order in the police system. He dealt with all those matters we are dealing with on matters of terrorism. Intelligence improved, the coordination of intelligence improved, because it is what is very important for that office, because of the nature and the weight of the responsibilities that's in that office. You need a good manager, a person who's going to be able to coordinate, because there is no lack of expertise in this country who will do the prosecution.
So, of course, the record, as you've mentioned, of the IG, that's questionable. That's how you see it. Yeah. But back to the point you mentioned, that there are those who say he's not practiced. He's coming into the criminal justice system. Yeah. In your view, fine, we've had prosecutions across the board, but when it comes to actually getting the prominent individuals, impunity continues to thrive. We have not seen a DPP that will come in and grab the bull by its horns. Is it that there is no such person who can do that because of the state of our country? Or is it that the long chain of the criminal justice system just has so many loopholes that they drop the ball?
First of all, this person is part of the criminal justice system. Investigation is part of it. So it's coming from that field. Number two is that the responsibility to take on any person when the evidence has been collected is is the duty of the DPP and the people who work under him. And he makes the ultimate decision to say, we are prosecuting so and so. First of all, on one hand, it is the integrity and the confidence and the hard work and the decision of the person who holds the office. Number two, it is also the role of the investigations, because I see so many people blaming the DPP that he has not charged someone, or no, he's not succeeded to get convictions. But the criminal justice system is not about DPP alone. There is the part of the person who are going to do the investigation itself, which is in the police sector, where now the nominee Haji comes from. And we hope that there will be then good coordination between the DPP's office and the police who are doing the investigation. Because sometimes you get the file, or even the EACC, you get the file from EACC or the police, it gets to your desk, the evidence is not there, you go prosecute because you just want to please people. And yet, ultimately, even if you do so and you don't get conviction, you have wasted public resources. So the coordination of all this process is important. Number two is that when you talk about people holding, or prominent people should be prosecuted, you must understand also the Constitution that says that presumption of innocence for everybody. Mere allegations or mentioning people's names is not a basis of that so-and-so should be convicted. We live in a very suspicious nation where if any person is facing any allegations, conclusions have been made. Remember that you can be prominent today, you are not prominent tomorrow, and that crime does not rot. So even if you escape today, and you are out of favor from the office you are dealing with, it will still follow you. So they cannot be excused to say that you cannot find those who are in office now, and you can't also find those who left office. If indeed those processes were going on, it will, the justice system will just be able to deal with you even long after. Okay. It is the personal integrity of the person who holds the office to take that responsibility. It doesn't matter that Haji has been appointed through a process, or a person who was in the police system, or through a process that is seen that he's been favored. Whether that is true or not is contestable. But once you hold the office, you make this decision. You say, do I want to leave a legacy that will be remembered that I was just covering up, or do I want to leave a legacy that I made a decision and I did the job?
I've spoken to quite a number of lawyers today, finally, and many of them, that concern, he's not practiced. Yeah. Where has he come from? Yeah. He's largely pro-government, having worked in the establishment. This is an independent office. You need to have an independent mind. There are many who think he's already failed even before he's begun, if he gets confirmed, finally.
It is not the process of appointment that makes you independent. It is the security of tenure in the office that makes you independent. So you've seen in America, the president appoints the FBI. He appoints the Attorney General, and then the Attorney General investigates the President, and the FBI investigates the President.
Well, we are not there yet.
No, not just I'm saying that once, and they are doing it and they don't have security of tenure. They can be,
But you cannot say security of tenure guarantees, the kind of independence that is required.
Actually, I am saying in the, in the U.S. example, that person is doing that investigation and he has no security of tenure. Now ours, no matter who appointed him, where he came from, his independence is guaranteed by virtue of holding the office. It's not by virtue of how you have been appointed. It is this office that you are in has a security of tenure. Even if the president, assuming that there was no interview panel, Parliament is going to be unanimous in his appointment, assuming even the president was appointing him straight to the office of DPP. Once he holds that office of DPP, from there, his independence can only be removed by a tribunal. He must use that independence. The reason why the Constitution guaranteed that independence is so that no matter who is appointed and his relationship with anybody else, if he's a person of integrity, he must be able to take advantage of that independence of that office and do his job.
All right. Many thanks. Leader of Majority in the Senate, Kipchumba Murkomen, giving us his insights on this subject. Yvonne.
Thank you very much, Sophia Wanuna, and many thanks as well to the Senate Majority Leader, Senator Kipchumba Murkomen. All right, so let's start the conversation real quick. Let's get into it. My guests, once again, Lempa Suyanka, we have Mudomi Diankolu and Kakai Kissinger. Lempa, I'd like to begin with you. Your comments on the process of nomination as well as the choice of nominee.
Yes, thank you very much, Yvonne. It is very important that the President has moved with speed in accordance with the law, to appoint someone or to nominate someone to continue articulating the role as provided for in the Constitution. But I have a lot of misgiving on how the whole process was done, because it was not done in accordance with the dictates of the Constitution, as in we did not see public participation as we have seen in other offices. You remember when the office of the Chief Justice was being filled in, there was a lot of media attention where those interviews were being conducted in live broadcast was done, and Kenyans were able to participate and to follow and actually to see and have to have a word on or to contribute, as the Constitution says that people participation is very important. So therefore, in a situation whereby the recruitment exercise is very opaque, people are not fully in participation. And this is a very important office, because it is the office that leads to access to justice. Because you realize that the office of the office of the prosecutor, the DPP, Director of Public Prosecutor, is very crucial in realizing access to justice by people who have been wronged by others or by the state itself. The office of the Director of Public Prosecution is linked is joined in the hip with the police. And if you look at Article 157, especially 157.4, the Director of Public Prosecution can actually order the Inspector General to investigate on a matter. And therefore, most of the cases, if you've been following Yvonne, you would find that they are lost at the point of investigation and prosecutorial services. So that these two offices are very important, and the holders thereof are supposed to be people with a lot of experience, people who are eminently qualified, and people who are dedicated to serve the public. So we would have expected a lot of scrutiny by the media and by the public to make sure that we have the best person. I want to draw parallels with what we saw at the office of the prosecutor at the ICC.
Yeah.
The type of prosecutorial efforts that we saw was above board.
Okay, all right. We will come back and talk about... yes, we'll come back and talk a little bit more about that. Mudomi, I wonder what your experience has been with the office of the DPP. We've talked about its evolution since 2010. You're within the corridors of justice on a very regular basis. What's your experience with that? What sort of office would or environment would the new appointee be going into?
Many thanks, Yvonne. For me, the biggest challenge that the new appointee will face, which I believe all the others have faced before, is the question of the political economy of Kenya and how it interacts with the Office of Director of Public Prosecutions. And in particular, I mean, if you are familiar with the history and development of Kenya, you realize that there are certain business and political elites that have captured the state, with the result that they seem to be somehow immune to the criminal justice process, especially as far as we talk about corruption and economic crime and impunity. And if you're familiar with the history of Kenya, if you analyze this appointment in the context of all the others, then the message I get from where I see it is among the policymakers, perhaps because of conflict of interest, the unstated objective seems to be we need a safe pair of hands in that office. And by safe pair of hands, we mean a person, even though independent on paper, is never actually going to call the bluff. As far as mega corruption is concerned, as far as impunity by the political class and business elites is concerned. And there are many, if you check actually in our recent past, the only DPP who appeared prepared to actually call the bluff, whether it's to prosecute serious criminal elements or to deal with the real problems we've had with the criminal justice in Kenya was perhaps Philip Murgo, and he was outed out of office unceremoniously. So for me, this appointment, especially when you look at it in the context of the opaque process, because the process, as the former contributor said, was not transparent, was not participatory, which is another way of saying actually that process is unconstitutional because it fails the very basic tenets of our constitutional framework.
Yeah, okay. Isn't it interesting, Kakai, that we're tapping into the National Spy Agency? If he is approved by Parliament, we would essentially have a spy in the office of the DPP, or a former one at least, and a former spy as Inspector General of Police.
Actually, Yvonne, that is one of the greatest achievements, or one of the greatest attributes to this appointment. And the reason why I'm saying that is that remember that the office of the DPP is a creation of the new constitution and Article 157 of the constitution. And subsequent to that, we've had several amendments in terms of the law to actually put this office of the DPP into perspective. As you've said before, that before it was a department under the office of the Attorney General, and therefore didn't have the capacities to actually deal with prosecutorial challenges. But one of the biggest gains, I think, that President Uhuru Kenyatta has achieved is to actually get somebody to be the DPP, irrespective of the challenges that people are raising, the fact that he's not been in practice and all that, but to get somebody who has been in the other chains of prosecutions, in other chains of criminality. So that when you have somebody who is coming out from a department like where he's coming from, then it's adding value. Because remember...
Okay, Kai, what sort of value would he be adding?
Yes, I'm coming to that. Remember that the office of the DPP is supposed to be independent. That's a fact that is guaranteed in the Constitution. But at the same time, that office acts with what we call interdependence. It must rely on other arms of government, other arms of other institutions, which are in the criminal justice system. So the fact that he's coming from NIS, it means therefore that he has intelligence, he has enough intelligence within that institution, and is going to canvass and add value to the functions of the office of the DPP. So for me, I think I look at it at the fact that he's going to enhance links with other departments and with other government agencies that deal with issues that he's supposed to deal with. So it's a value, actually.
Lempa, I saw you shaking your head. Do you want to react real quick before we go for a break?
Yes, I don't think he's bringing any value because there are so many people like Deputy Director of Public Prosecution, Dorcas Odur, who we saw during the prosecution, during the Commission of Inquiry into Goldenberg. She performed very well, and so many other people. And let me tell you, you could bring value in one area but lose value in another one. You remember the outgoing or the former Director of Public Prosecution, Keriako Tobiko, was sometimes actively participating in court cases. A good example is when we had the Security Laws Amendment Act and the prosecution of Robert Chomley, the late Chomley, who killed Robert Njoya. I do not think that someone who has not been actively participating in the corridors of justice or prosecuting or actually practicing as an advocate would bring much value that is more than the actual hands-on prosecution in the court of justice. Because that's the hallmark of the office of the DPP, to make sure that he coordinates with the National Police Service so that at least there is access to justice to so many people. There are so many cases that are lost. Judges do not lose cases. Cases are lost because they are poorly investigated or they have been poorly prosecuted. So he may, as my colleague is saying, bring some value, but the value that will be lost is far much higher than the one that will be gained.
All right, gentlemen, I want us to take a break on the show. When we return, we'll talk about some of the successes and some of the challenges. I will remind you that 23 persons were acquitted of charges to defraud NYS. Remember that big case? That's been a big setback for the office of the DPP and the justice system as a whole. We'll come back to that and much more here when we return, including your feedback here on The Big